What Judge Judy uncovered that day didn't just expose a crime. It shattered a millionaire family's reputation live on national television. It was supposed to be a simple civil case about a missing diamond bracelet, but by the time it was over, the nation wasn't talking about stolen jewelry, they were talking about the truth that money couldn't buy, and a verdict that humbled an entire Beverly Hills dynasty. The Hastings family walked into Judge Judy's courtroom that morning radiating entitlement. They were rich, famous in their own circles, and used to getting what they wanted. Eleanor Hastings, perfectly dressed, pearls around her neck, posture like royalty, led the charge. Beside her sat her 20-year-old son Ryan, smirking faintly as though the outcome had already been bought and paid for. Their lawyer carried a stack of glossy photographs, confident in the story they'd rehearsed 100 times, that their maid, Maria Santos, had stolen a diamond bracelet worth $80,000. But even before the first witness was sworn in, there was something electric in the air, the kind of tension that tells you someone's about to get caught. Judy felt it immediately. She'd seen arrogance like this before, too polished, too practiced. The more perfect the story sounded, the more her instincts screamed that something was wrong. And she was right. Eleanor's voice oozed false sweetness as she began, "Your Honor, this woman betrayed our trust. We treated her like family and she robbed us blind." Her tone implied that even being accused by her was a privilege. Maria stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes red from sleepless nights. She didn't have an attorney, she couldn't afford one. All she had was her truth. Judge Judy listened, head slightly tilted, eyes sharp but expression unreadable. $80,000, she repeated. Quite an accusation. Then, with that razor-dry tone only Judy could deliver, she added, "I assume you have proof, not just outrage." Eleanor smiled tightly. "Of course we do. We have photographs, timestamps, and witnesses." But there was something in that overconfidence, something rehearsed, that Judy didn't like. She'd been in this courtroom long enough to know that real victims don't perform. Real victims tremble. They stumble. They cry. These people smiled. Maria's voice finally broke the tension. Soft, accented, but steady. "I never took anything. I've cleaned their home for 4 years. I know every room better than my own. That bracelet was never missing." There was no pleading in her voice, only quiet pain. The kind that comes from knowing the truth but being powerless to prove it. The audience could feel the temperature shift. The contrast between the opulent family and the humble maid was almost cinematic. You could sense viewers leaning closer to their screens, wondering if maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as simple as it seemed. Judy leaned forward, pen tapping the desk, studying Maria's face with the practiced precision of someone who's seen every kind of liar, and every kind of truth-teller. Then Judy said something that instantly changed the energy in the room. "Tell me, Mrs. Hastings, when did you last wear that bracelet?" Eleanor hesitated. Just for a second. But in that pause the mask slipped. It was quick, subtle, but Judy caught it. The courtroom didn't notice, but she did. That single hesitation was the moment the story started to unravel. Ryan quickly interjected, "We noticed it gone the next morning, Your Honor." Maria was the only one in the house that night. "The only one?" Judy asked. "Not you? Not your parents?" Ryan swallowed. "I mean, yes, we were home, but..." Judy raised a finger. "But you're certain she stole it?" Her tone was surgical now, cutting through excuses like glass. That's when it hit her. The rhythm of their story was too perfect. Too aligned. Too rehearsed. Families don't speak in matching sentences unless they've practiced. And the more Judy listened, the clearer it became that this wasn't about theft. It was about something much darker. Pride, control, and humiliation. What the Hastings family didn't know was that Judy already had an idea forming. Something small. Something sharp. Because sometimes the truth hides in the smallest details. A date, a print, a word. And one tiny fingerprint on a jewelry box would soon unravel everything the Hastings had built their case on. But before we go deeper, tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone lie so confidently it made your blood boil? Because this case will do exactly that. And if you believe truth always wins in the end, hit that subscribe button right now, because what Judy does next will restore your faith in justice, and you'll want to be there when the tables turn on the richest liars in the room. What began as a simple accusation was about to turn into a public downfall that the world would never forget. The courtroom lights glimmered against Eleanor Hastings' diamond earrings as she took her seat, her movements deliberate and elegant, the kind of grace that comes from years of being obeyed. Her husband wasn't present. He'd preferred to avoid public embarrassment, as their lawyer quietly explained. But Eleanor didn't need him. She had her composure, her fortune, and the certainty that money and appearances would do the talking. Ryan sat beside her, wearing a designer blazer and the smug half-smile of a man who had never been held accountable for anything. His foot tapped lazily under the table, betraying his impatience. Across from them, Maria Santos looked small, not in spirit but in stature. Her uniform was neatly pressed, but her trembling hands gave her away. She held a worn leather purse, its edges cracked from years of use. Inside it was her entire defense: a folded pay stub, a bus card, and a crumpled letter from her landlord asking for late rent. When Eleanor spoke, her words oozed the kind of controlled venom only privilege can produce. "Your Honor," she began, "we treated Maria like family. We invited her into our home. We trusted her with our property, our privacy, our children. And this is how she repays us, by stealing from us." Judge Judy's pen stopped mid-note. Her eyes flicked up, steady and unimpressed. "You trusted her?" she said, voice low and precise. "Or did you just assume she'd never fight back?" A hush fell over the courtroom. Ryan's smirk faltered, the lawyer shifted in his chair, and Eleanor's polished composure cracked just a little. For the first time she seemed unsure of how to respond. Judy's tone wasn't angry, it was surgical. She'd found the vein and was about to make the first cut. Maria lowered her eyes. "I didn't take anything," she whispered, her accent soft but clear. "I worked for them since before Christmas. I cleaned, cooked, looked after their dog when they traveled. I trusted them." Eleanor gave a cold laugh, quick and practiced. "Of course she says that. They always do, don't they?" That line did it. Judy's eyebrow lifted slightly, the signal that she was done tolerating arrogance. "Mrs. Hastings," she said, "I've been doing this long enough to know that when someone starts a case with, 'We treated her like family,' it usually means they treated her like furniture." The courtroom audience murmured in agreement. Judy's words hit like a gavel before the verdict. Eleanor stiffened, her hand tightening on the table. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Judy replied calmly. "Now, tell me how you discovered the bracelet was missing." Eleanor straightened her pearls. "I went to my dressing room that morning. The box was open. The bracelet was gone. Maria was the only one with access to that room." "Only her?" Judy asked, voice rising slightly. "No house guests? No family?" Ryan leaned forward quickly, eager to defend. "We live in a secure estate, Your Honor. Only staff come and go." "Ah," Judy said. "So your argument is that you're too rich to be robbed by anyone but the help?" Ryan blinked. "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you meant," Judy snapped, cutting him off. "But here's the problem. Wealth doesn't make you credible. Evidence does. And right now, all you've got are assumptions and ego." Eleanor's lawyer tried to interject. "Your Honor, if we could just—" "You'll speak when I ask you to," Judy interrupted sharply. The authority in her voice was absolute. The courtroom audience erupted in soft gasps. The balance of power had shifted. Eleanor looked at her son, but Ryan avoided her gaze. For the first time, the Hastings looked smaller, not in money but in presence. Judy had flipped the energy of the room. Maria, though quiet, seemed to grow taller in spirit with every arrogant word that backfired against her accusers. Judy leaned back, her voice calm but laced with steel. "Let's continue. Bring me the photos, the timeline, and every statement you have. Because right now, I'm not sure who's on trial, your maid or your integrity." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that hangs in the air right before a storm. Everyone in the courtroom could feel it. The rich family's arrogance was beginning to crack. And if you've ever rooted for the underdog in a fight against power, tap that like button, because you'll want to see how fast this family's empire of lies starts to crumble once Judge Judy starts digging. Eleanor Hastings motioned confidently to her attorney. He rose, adjusting his silver cufflinks before presenting a glossy folder to Judge Judy's clerk. "Your Honor," he said, his tone smooth and assured, "these are still images taken directly from the Hastings private home security system. They clearly show the defendant, Maria Santos, in the act of removing a jewelry box from Mrs. Hastings' vanity." The words "clearly show" echoed through the room, as if repetition could make the evidence real. The attorney's polished shoes gleamed under the lights. but his confidence was about to meet the cold steel of Judy's scrutiny. Judy flipped through the printed photographs, her pen tapping lightly against the desk, a habit that always meant one thing: she smelled a lie. The images were grainy, blurred, and tinted slightly blue. Maria appeared in them, but her face wasn't visible, only her silhouette. The time and date were stamped in the corner, glowing faintly in red. Judy murmured, adjusting her glasses. Mrs. Hastings, you said this theft occurred last Thursday night. Is that correct? Eleanor nodded immediately. Yes, Your Honor. The morning after, I discovered the bracelet was gone. Judy's pen stopped. Her tone sharpened. Then, Mrs. Hastings, can you explain why the timestamp on this photograph reads, Monday, 10:47 p.m.? The air in the courtroom shifted. The sound of murmurs rippled across the audience like wind across dry leaves. Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. That must be a printing error, she said quickly. Or maybe the camera clock was off. Judge Judy's eyebrows rose. 3 days off? Interesting clock you've got there. Did it fix itself magically by Friday? The attorney tried to interject. It's likely a technical error, Your Honor. Stop, Judy said, slicing the air with her hand. You're telling me this woman stole something before she was even scheduled to work that day? Before she was even in your home? The courtroom fell silent. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade away. Ryan shifted in his chair, his face pale. His jaw tightened as he looked anywhere but at the judge. Judy noticed. She leaned back slightly, her voice calm but lethal. Tell me, Mr. Hastings, she said, addressing Ryan directly, who manages your home security footage? Ryan cleared his throat. I do. Sometimes. When my parents travel. So you handle the recordings? Yes, but... Then you'd know when this footage was taken, wouldn't you? Judy interrupted. You'd know whether this was Monday or Thursday. He hesitated, that fatal hesitation again. Eleanor jumped in, her voice shrill. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. That woman was alone in our home. Of course she did it. Judy's tone dropped a register. Mrs. Hastings, I don't take well to yelling. It usually means someone's losing control of their story. Eleanor's lawyer sank slightly in his chair, sensing the unraveling. Maria stood silently, clutching her purse, her eyes fixed on the judge with quiet hope. Judy turned another photo toward her. Maria, were you working on Monday night? No, Your Honor. My shift starts Wednesday morning. I only clean on Wednesdays and Fridays. I have the schedule from the agency if you want to see. She reached into her purse and handed Judy a folded sheet of paper. Judy scanned it quickly, then held it up for the courtroom to see. So according to this, Maria wasn't in the house until Wednesday morning. Which means these photos, this so-called proof, are useless at best and fraudulent at worst. A murmur of disbelief rolled through the room. Someone in the audience whispered, they forged it. Judy looked straight at Eleanor. I've seen all kinds of evidence in this courtroom, from real victims and professional liars. And I can tell you, Mrs. Hastings, when people doctor evidence, they always make the same mistake. They think wealth makes them untouchable. Eleanor's lips trembled slightly, though she tried to smile. We would never. Save it, Judy cut in. I'll decide what you would or wouldn't do once I see the rest of this circus. She stacked the photographs neatly, aligning the corners with a faint click, a sound that, to anyone familiar with Judy's courtroom, meant the hammer was coming down soon. Maria's eyes welled up, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. For the first time since the case began, the truth was starting to whisper louder than the lies. And though the Hastings still sat in their designer clothes, something had changed. Their wealth no longer looked powerful. It looked desperate. The first crack had appeared. The empire of arrogance was beginning to crumble, and everyone in that courtroom could feel it. The tension in the courtroom was so thick you could almost feel it pressing down on the air. Judge Judy sat upright, her eyes fixed on the folder the clerk had just placed before her. The faint rustle of paper was the only sound as she flipped through the lab results. The Hastings attorney fidgeted with his pen, and Ryan's nervous tapping echoed off the polished wood floor like a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. Finally, Judy looked up. Her voice came out calm, too calm. Mrs. Hastings, she began, you've accused this woman of stealing an $80,000 diamond bracelet. You've presented photographs that don't align with time, testimony that doesn't align with reality, and a story that's starting to collapse under its own weight. She paused just long enough to make Eleanor's jaw tighten. "But before I make any ruling, we're going to do something I like to call the test of truth." She nodded to the bailiff. "Bring in the jewelry box and the fingerprint report." The bailiff returned a moment later carrying a sealed evidence bag. Inside, the jewelry box gleamed beneath fluorescent lights, small, elegant, unmistakably expensive. Judy took the folder of results and slid on her reading glasses. Her eyes skimmed the page, her face expressionless. Then, without warning, she smiled, a smile that always meant someone's about to regret lying in her courtroom. "Interesting," she said softly. "Very interesting." Eleanor shifted. "What does it say?" Judy folded the paper deliberately, setting it on the bench. "It says there are 2 sets of fingerprints on this jewelry box. But before we get to that, Mrs. Hastings, let me ask you, did anyone else besides Maria have access to this box?" "No," Eleanor said instantly. "It's mine. Always has been. She's the only one who cleans my dressing room." Ryan added quickly, "I never touch my mother's jewelry." Judy's tone hardened. "You sure about that?" Ryan blinked. "Yes." Judy snapped open the folder again. "Because according to the Los Angeles Forensic Lab, the maid's fingerprints aren't on this box at all." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Maria covered her mouth in shock. Eleanor went pale, her hand flying to her pearls as if to protect herself from the truth itself. Judy raised her voice to silence the noise. "But you know whose prints are on it?" she continued, her eyes locked on Ryan. "Yours." Right under the lid, smudged against the velvet lining. Eleanor turned toward her son in disbelief. "Ryan? That's impossible." Judy's voice cracked like thunder. "What's impossible is how far privilege will go to escape accountability." The room went dead quiet again. Judy leaned forward, her expression fierce. "You faked evidence, lied under oath, and dragged an innocent woman's name through the mud just to teach her a lesson?" Ryan's lips parted, but no words came. His face was ghost white. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a whisper. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he muttered. "I just wanted her gone. I didn't think it would." Judy slammed her hand down on the desk. "You didn't think? You destroyed this woman's reputation. You made her look like a thief in front of the whole world because you thought your family name made you untouchable." Eleanor stood abruptly. "He's lying. This is absurd." "Sit down, Mrs. Hastings," Judy roared. The gavel came down once, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "The box tells the truth even when people won't." Maria's tears streamed freely now, her trembling hands clasped together in disbelief. Judy turned to her, her voice softening for the first time all day. "You don't need to say anything, Miss Santos. The evidence already has." She turned back to the Hastings family. "Your arrogance could have cost this woman her job, her home, and her dignity. I don't care how rich you are, when you bring lies into this courtroom, they don't buy you protection. They buy you consequences." Eleanor's face was frozen in shock. Ryan looked like he might collapse under the weight of his own guilt. The audience sat stunned, barely breathing, knowing they had just witnessed the moment a lie turned into a confession. Then, with one final resounding crack of her gavel, Judge Judy ended it. "Case proven. The truth always wins, even against money." And in that instant, every ounce of power the Hastings thought they had disappeared, replaced by the only thing they couldn't buy, justice. The air inside Judge Judy's courtroom had shifted. The arrogance that had once filled every corner was gone, replaced by a thick, silent tension, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks. Eleanor Hastings sat frozen, her manicured fingers trembling as Judge Judy reached for a second folder on her desk, thicker, heavier, and sealed with evidence tabs. The courtroom audience leaned forward instinctively, sensing that the next few minutes would decide everything. Judy opened the folder slowly, her movements deliberate and calm, too calm. "Now, before we wrap this up," she said, "there's one last thing I want to address. Because something told me from the start that this wasn't just arrogance. This was orchestration." Eleanor's head snapped up. "I beg your pardon?" Judy's eyes flicked toward her, sharp as glass. "Don't beg yet, Mrs. Hastings. You might want to save that for the district attorney." A gasp spread through the audience. Judy continued, her tone now surgical, precise, cutting, impossible to escape. "You see, when this case first hit my docket, I had my clerk request copies of all communications between the plaintiff and her son regarding their household staff. And lo and behold, she held up a printed transcript, her voice rising. We found something very interesting. Ryan's face turned white as his mother shot him a look that could have burned through marble. Don't, he whispered under his breath. Don't read that. But Judy was already reading. Text message from Ryan Hastings, timestamp 2 days before the alleged theft. Mom, she's getting too comfortable. We need to make her understand who she works for. Eleanor's hand shot to her mouth, but Judy didn't pause. Reply from Eleanor Hastings. Don't worry. I'll handle it. I'll tell James to pull a few clips from the security cameras. We'll make her nervous. Maybe she quits on her own. The courtroom erupted, gasps, whispers, audible disbelief. Judy slammed her gavel once. Quiet, she barked. Then, turning back to the plaintiffs, she said in a low, cold voice, You didn't lose a bracelet. You lost your integrity. The line hit like lightning. Eleanor visibly deflated, her posture collapsing in on itself. Ryan's eyes glistened, not with remorse but humiliation. Their lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Judy leaned forward, voice measured and deadly. You used this court to wage a personal vendetta against a woman who trusted you. You faked evidence, forged a timeline, and lied under oath. You tried to ruin an innocent person's life for sport. You thought your family name made you untouchable. It doesn't. It makes your behavior even uglier. She turned her gaze toward Maria, who was crying quietly into a tissue handed to her by a court aide. Miss Santos, Judy said softly, you've been through enough. You were humiliated, accused, and almost destroyed by people who thought they were above the law. But I want you to know something. The law doesn't bend for power. It bends for truth. Maria nodded through her tears. Thank you, Your Honor. Judy turned back to the Hastings family, her tone once again sharp enough to cut steel. Here's what's going to happen. You will pay Miss Santos full restitution for emotional distress, lost wages and defamation, a total of $75,000. And that's just the beginning. Eleanor's head jerked up. The beginning? Yes, Judy said, eyes narrowing. Because I'm forwarding this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal fraud. Filing false evidence and perjury are serious crimes. You wanted to teach her a lesson? Congratulations. You just taught the world one instead. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Eleanor's shaky breathing. Judy took one last look at them, her voice soft but merciless. We're done here. Then she turned to the audience camera, her expression breaking into the faintest smirk. If this moment made you smile, she said, if you love seeing arrogance crumble, smash that like button right now. Because what comes next might be the most satisfying verdict you'll ever hear. And with a final echoing crack of her gavel, the illusion of the Hastings superiority shattered completely. The crowd burst into stunned applause, Maria buried her face in her hands, and across the internet, thousands of viewers would soon replay this very moment, over and over, calling it the day justice finally punched up. The sound of Judge Judy's gavel had barely faded before the clip began spreading like wildfire. Within hours, the internet had its newest symbol of justice. A moment so satisfying, so raw that it transcended television. By sunset, the words, "Wealth doesn't buy truth," were everywhere. They were replayed, remixed, captioned, and shared by millions who saw themselves in Maria Santos, the quiet worker who finally saw power kneel to honesty. The courtroom footage exploded across social media like a storm. On TikTok, short clips of Eleanor's stunned silence racked up millions of views in mere hours. On Twitter, #JusticeForMaria trended nationwide, sandwiched between political news and celebrity gossip. Every frame of Judy's verdict became a meme, a rallying cry, a reminder that arrogance has an expiration date. Someone clipped the exact moment Judy said, "You didn't lose a bracelet. You lost your integrity." That 7-second snippet hit 30 million views overnight. Users from every corner of the country stitched it into their own videos. Janitors, nurses, teachers, small business owners, all saying the same thing. This one's for every underpaid worker who's been accused of something they didn't do. The story caught the attention of major news outlets. CNN ran a headline the next morning, "Judge Judy levels the playing field, Beverly Hills family exposed for framing Maid." The Washington Post followed with a feature titled, "Wealth Doesn't Buy Truth, Why This Courtroom Clip Broke America's Heart." Even late-night talk shows replayed the footage with roaring applause from their audiences. Meanwhile, the Hastings family's world crumbled at record speed. Luxury brands quietly pulled their endorsement contracts. Invitations to charity galas vanished. A boutique magazine that had once called Eleanor, the face of high society grace, deleted every photo of her from its website. Ryan's exclusive internship offer at a tech company was revoked after the CEO tweeted, "Integrity matters more than a family name." In less than 48 hours, the dynasty that had towered over everyone else was reduced to a cautionary tale. Their social media accounts were flooded with comments, not hate but disbelief. "You ruined someone's life for fun?" wrote one user. "This is why people don't trust privilege anymore." Another comment read, "Judge Judy did what the system rarely does, she made money answer to truth." And then, something extraordinary happened. A viewer from Illinois created a GoFundMe for Maria Santos with a modest goal of $5,000 to help her rebuild her life. Within 2 days, it crossed $250,000. Donations poured in from nurses, janitors, and even retired veterans who wrote messages like, "This is for every honest worker who's been disrespected." Maria's reaction was captured in a follow-up interview. Sitting in her small apartment, still wearing her housekeeping uniform, she said through tears, "I just did what was right. I told the truth. I never thought people would care this much." Judge Judy's courtroom staff later revealed that Maria had written a handwritten thank you letter to Judy, simple, sincere, and humble. It read, "You gave me my life back, Your Honor. Not just in the courtroom, but in the world's eyes." The internet wasn't done yet. A viral TikTok trend began where users would film themselves cleaning their workspaces while mouthing Judy's line, "Wealth doesn't buy truth." It became a badge of moral pride, a reminder that even those who have little can stand taller than those who have everything. By the end of the week, major magazines called it the most iconic courtroom takedown since the dawn of reality TV. Analysts dubbed it the class war verdict, while millions simply called it karma. For once, the internet wasn't divided. Everyone, rich or poor, young or old, agreed on one thing. Watching arrogance fall and justice rise was the kind of story people never get tired of seeing. Maria didn't seek fame, but she became something bigger, a symbol. Proof that truth can outshine money, that grace can silence greed, and that even in a world obsessed with power, decency can still trend. Weeks passed, but the story refused to fade. What had started as a humiliating courtroom drama for one wealthy family became a national conversation about truth, privilege, and power. Maria Santos, once a quiet maid with nothing but her word, had become the face of courage. She didn't ask for fame, it found her. She didn't demand justice, she inspired it. In her first interview after the verdict, Maria stood outside a small storefront with a modest sign. "Santos Cleaning Services, honest work, honest people." Her eyes shone as reporters asked how it felt to have the whole country behind her. She smiled softly. "I just told the truth," she said. Judge Judy did the rest. The story resonated far beyond the courtroom. Journalists began writing op-eds about the Judy effect, describing how one televised case reignited people's belief that the legal system could still deliver real justice. Small business owners began printing "Wealth doesn't buy truth" on stickers, t-shirts, and even storefront windows. It wasn't just a quote anymore, it was a movement. Clips of the verdict continued circulating, reaching every corner of the internet. Students used it in debate classes. Motivational speakers quoted it in seminars. Even corporate ethics programs started showing the video to teach accountability. The moment Judge Judy told Eleanor Hastings, "You didn't lose a bracelet, you lost your integrity," became a line etched into American pop culture. As for the Hastings family, silence. Their mansion went up for sale. Their social calendar dried up. The world that once applauded their wealth now whispered about their disgrace. Ryan disappeared from social media entirely. Eleanor's former friends publicly distanced themselves, pretending they never knew her. It wasn't just a loss of status, it was exile by truth. Maria, on the other hand, used her platform for something greater. With the money raised from her GoFundMe, she didn't buy luxury or revenge. She invested it in others. Her new business hired single mothers, immigrants, and people who had lost jobs because of unfair accusations, the same kind she once faced. Local news stations followed her story as it evolved. Footage showed Maria standing beside her small team, holding new uniforms with her company's motto stitched in gold thread, "Clean hands, clear conscience." That line alone went viral all over again. Judge Judy never commented publicly beyond one short statement. At a charity gala weeks later, she told a reporter, "Justice isn't about punishing the powerful. It's about protecting the powerless." The clip spread across platforms with millions of shares. People didn't just see her as a TV judge anymore, they saw her as the voice of balance in an unbalanced world. The story became a cultural landmark, an example teachers used to show how dignity and truth can triumph in places where wealth usually silences the weak. Comment sections filled with stories of people who had faced their own injustices. "Maria's story gave me strength to fight my wrongful firing. I reported my boss for harassment after watching this video." The ripple effect of that single courtroom moment grew into something far larger than any gavel strike. And then came the line that defined it all, the one every viewer carried in their mind long after the video ended. "They tried to bury her with lies, but truth dug her out and stood her tall." That sentence echoed over millions of screens, each replay reminding people that justice can still surprise the world when it hits hardest. Maria's quiet bravery had become a modern legend, proof that honesty doesn't just survive corruption, it exposes it. So now it's your turn. If this story restored your faith in justice, hit that like button so hard your phone feels it. Comment "Truth wins" below, because that's what happened here. And make sure you're subscribed, because next time, we're covering a case where a billionaire's daughter thought she was untouchable, until Judge Judy made her cry in court. Because in the end, no matter how rich or powerful, truth always wins.